What's up guys, Asian here again with another theory crafting video, and today we're going to be looking at the Maelstrom bow, poisons versus a disease damage enchant. So this was brought up by one of our viewers who want to know whether infused with a disease damage enchant, see if I can find it here, will beat out a nirnhoned bow with a poison. Now, the answer is that the nirnhoned with the poison will beat out the infused with the disease damage, but the question is by how much? Is it worth keeping an infused Maelstrom bow and just enchanting it with the disease damage enchant versus transmuting it into nirnhoned and creating all these damage health poisons in order to pull out the most DPS? Is it actually worth going through all that trouble? So this is what we're going to explore today. So we're just going to be doing two parses real quick. I already have several parses already, as you guys have come to expect by now. So we're just going to be comparing nirnhoned with the double Ravage Health poisons, compare that to the infused with the disease damage enchant. So one thing that you're going to want to keep in mind is that the disease damage enchant also has a secondary status effect. It applies Defile onto the enemy. Now, in normal scenarios, in PvE scenarios, actually isn't really going to do much because the bosses aren't really receiving any healing to begin with. So while you do get that secondary effect of Defile through the disease damage enchant, ultimately it's not actually all that useful in the end. So that's kind of one thing you want to keep note of. And so another thing that you're going to want to remember too is that nirnhoned boosts Maelstrom bow by 200 additional weapon damage. That actually doesn't really matter too much when it comes to ultimately how much your Endless Hail is going to tick for, at least not that much, because Endless Hail and Caltrops inherit the weapon damage and max stamina modifier, the invisible boost to your tooltip, from the bar that you're currently on, not the bar in which it was cast. So the 200 extra damage on nirnhoned will affect it for the short time that you have Endless Hail and Caltrops up while you're on your back bar, but ultimately when you do swap to your front bar, the nirnhoned damage actually doesn't matter at all. So there's also that aspect to it as well, the kind of argument for infused a disease damage enchant instead. So we're going to start things off first with our double Ravage Health poison. Rotation's going to be pretty much the same. Gear is also exactly the same between each of these parses. We're going with Velodreth, Sunderflame, and 5-piece VO with 1 axe and 1 dagger. We're going with the standard nirnhoned with the poison on the main hand, with infused and weapon damage on the offhand. So there we go, that is the double Ravage Health. We pulled about 36.6k. Just gonna swap out the bow and take off our poisons. So now we're using an infused disease damage bow. And I am going to record that one parse. That is on the lower end. I have gotten higher, but it's just kind of the nature of using something like Velodreth's. Sometimes it procs, sometimes it doesn't. So again, this is an infused disease damage enchant bow. If you look at the debuffs, you might see Defile on there. That's coming from the disease enchant. pulling pretty much even with that last parse. But remember that we're looking at averages because there is a little bit of RNG involved with the crits and the bleeds from the axes as well as Veladreths. Alright, so there we go. So we pulled 36.7k on that one. Let me put that down. So take a look at comp metrics. So we can see here that the disease damage enchant right here did less than the poison damage enchant, which is to be expected because this will only proc while we're on our bow bar. Dealt 1039 DPS overall. And if you take a look at our Nirn double Ravage Health poison, you can see that the Ravage Health poison the first component alone deals as much DPS, so the extra 500 DPS from the other second component typically pushes the nirnhoned with the double Ravage Health poison over the infused disease damage enchant. You're just looking at the DPS contribution between the two, because that's really the only difference between DPS contribution besides the crits and the other stuff. Everything else is going to be pretty much the exact same. So we're just looking at the DPS here, and creeping Ravage Health deals 1054. Combine that with the Ravage Health, which deals 523. So we're looking at about 1500-ish, 1600-ish DPS. And if you compare that to the infused disease damage, it's only pulling 1039. So you know, you kind of want to take that into consideration there. Now there is obviously going to be the randomness of proc chances, of crits, things like that with the poisons, so that's kind of why the disease damage enchant is pulling higher just a little bit than the Nirn that we did. But if we swap over now to our spreadsheet here, we did 6 parses across all both of them. So this one is with the poisons and this one's with the disease damage enchant, and we can see that the difference is actually fairly significant. It's about 800 or so additional DPS, which translates to about a 2% difference. You can still pull very good DPS with the infused disease. You can see here we did manage to pull a couple of 37k parses, but with the double Ravage Health poisons, it's just easier to get higher and more consistent numbers. You can see we got 4 parses that were above 37k compared to with the disease enchant, and we did get one that was 38.3k, which is probably a little bit higher than what you would expect to pull from a 3 million dummy parse, but it still just kind of shows you the ceiling with double Ravage Health poisons is higher than that with the infused disease damage enchant. But all said and done, even with the without the nirnhoned poisons, you can still pull very good DPS with the infused disease enchant. So if you do have an infused Maelstrom bow and you don't know nirnhoned yet in order to transmute it, definitely just take advantage of it. Use your disease damage enchant, and you can still pull very good DPS. It's just a matter of mastering your rotation and making sure you have everything down pat. So that's it for this video. Hope you guys found it informative, and I will see you guys in the next dungeon.